My name is Wilbur Spencer, 67 years old, and still standing tall despite what life has thrown at me. After 30 years in the military and 5 years a widower, I never expected my own flesh and blood would be the one to break my heart. When my daughter Elizabeth, now 40, screamed in my face, "Go away, or I'll call the police," I felt something inside me finally snap. But instead of arguing, I simply smiled, walked out and called someone else instead. My realtor. That decision changed everything. If you're watching this right now, let me know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join me as I share how I saved myself by letting go of the home that held 40 years of memories. I met Mary Ann in the summer of '78 at a county fair in Nebraska. She was selling handmade quilts with her mother, and I was home on leave from the Army. One look at those bright blue eyes, and I was a goner. We married 6 months later, and Elizabeth came along 2 years after that. Our little family was everything I had ever wanted. The house on Maple Street became our home when Elizabeth was just 3 years old. It was nothing fancy, a 3-bedroom colonial with a big backyard and a wraparound porch. But over 40 years, that house became the center of our world. Mary Ann planted roses along the fence line, and I built a treehouse for Elizabeth that stayed standing long after she outgrew it. Every holiday, every celebration, every quiet Sunday morning reading the paper happened within those walls. Mary Ann kept everything running smoothly while I was deployed. She was the kind of woman who could fix a leaky faucet, help with algebra homework, and still have dinner on the table by 6. When I finally retired from the service with the rank of colonel, she joked that she was being demoted from general of the household to co-captain. We planned to grow old together in that house, but life had other plans. The cancer diagnosis came suddenly 5 years ago, pancreatic. By the time they found it, there wasn't much they could do. I watched my strong, beautiful Mary Ann fade away in just 8 months. The last thing she made me promise was to keep living to find joy again. Elizabeth had always been Daddy's little girl growing up. She was bright, affectionate, and determined. I still remember her learning to ride a bike, insisting I let go of the seat even though she kept falling. "I'll do it myself, Daddy," she'd say, picking herself up again and again until she mastered it. That determination served her well through school and college. Things began to change when she met Thomas Harrison during her senior year at university. He was studying business and had big plans, always talking about the fortune he'd make. I had my reservations from the start. There was something calculated about him, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes. But Elizabeth was smitten, and I wanted her to be happy. They married a year after graduation, and slowly, my vibrant daughter began to change. The phone calls became less frequent, the visits shorter. When they did come for dinner, Thomas dominated the conversation, talking about his investments and connections, while Elizabeth sat quietly beside him. Mary Ann noticed it too, but cautioned me not to interfere. "She has to make her own choices, Will," she'd say. Their daughter Amanda came along 10 years into the marriage. A beautiful, thoughtful child who reminded me so much of Elizabeth at that age. I treasured my role as grandfather, though I often had to navigate around Thomas's controlling nature to spend time with her. He always seemed to be monitoring their interactions, scheduling their lives down to the minute. After Mary Ann passed, I threw myself into being the best grandfather I could be. I'd pick Amanda up from school once a week, take her for ice cream, and just listen. By the time she hit 17, she was confiding in me about her dreams of becoming a marine biologist, her struggles with friends, and sometimes in quieter moments, her concerns about the tension at home. "Mom and Dad fight about money a lot," she told me one afternoon as we sat on the porch swing. "Dad lost his job, but he won't tell anyone. He still leaves the house every morning like he's going to work." That was the first I'd heard about Thomas being unemployed. Elizabeth hadn't mentioned anything during her increasingly rare calls. It explained a lot, though, especially the changes I'd noticed in my daughter's behavior over the past 8 months. Elizabeth started dropping by the house more frequently, but there was something different about these visits. She'd wander from room to room, commenting on things I might want to downsize, asking if I ever felt lonely in such a big place. I chalked it up to concern at first. Perhaps she was worried about me rattling around alone in the family home. "Have you thought about what you're going to do with Mom's things?" she asked one day, running her hand over Marianne's collection of antique teacups. "They're right where they belong," I said simply. I wasn't ready to dismantle the life Marianne and I had built to erase her presence from our home. Elizabeth sighed, that impatient sound I'd become all too familiar with. "Dad, it's been 5 years. You need to move on." Moving on didn't mean forgetting. I still wore my wedding ring, still kept Marianne's robe hanging on the back of the bathroom door, still tended the rose bushes she'd planted. These weren't signs of being stuck in grief. They were honors to a love that had shaped my entire adult life. What I didn't realize then was that Elizabeth's sudden interest in my living situation had nothing to do with my emotional well-being, and everything to do with the financial crisis brewing in her own home. Thomas, the man who prided himself on his business acumen, had been hiding a growing mountain of debt behind a facade of success. My daughter was being crushed under the weight of it, and somehow she'd convinced herself that her father's assets were the solution. I began to notice small things going missing after her visits. Nothing valuable enough to confront her about, just sentimental items, family photographs, some of Marianne's jewelry. When I mentioned the missing silver frame that had held our wedding photo, Elizabeth brushed it off. "Oh, I borrowed that to scan the picture for Amanda's family history project. I must have forgotten to bring it back." There was never any family history project, as I would later learn from Amanda herself. The frame, like so many other pieces of my past, had been sold to cover another bill, another debt, another of Thomas's failed schemes. In all my years facing enemy fire, navigating military politics, and even battling the healthcare system during Marianne's illness, I never expected my greatest challenge would come from my own family, from the daughter I had raised and loved with everything in me. But as the winter chill settled over Maple Street that year, the true nature of Elizabeth's visits was about to become painfully clear. It started small, as these things often do. Elizabeth called one evening in October, her voice tight with what I recognized as forced casualness. "Dad, I hate to ask, but Amanda needs a new laptop for school. The science program requires specific software, and with things being tight right now." "How much do you need?" I asked without hesitation. My granddaughter's education was important, and I had always been generous with family. "2,000 should cover it," Elizabeth said, relief evident in her voice. I wrote the check the next day when she came by, waving away her promises to pay me back. "It's for Amanda's future," I said, genuinely happy to help. 3 weeks later, there was another call. This time, it was for Amanda's school trip to Washington, D.C., $1,000 for the educational tour. Then came the request for help with her braces adjustment, then special tutoring for advanced placement classes. I never questioned these expenses. In my mind, I was supporting my granddaughter's bright future and perhaps rebuilding some of the connection with my daughter that had faded over the years. Each time Elizabeth came by to collect a check, she'd stay a little longer, ask about my health, bring me a home-cooked meal. I started to believe we were finding our way back to each other. By January, the requests had grown larger and more frequent. $4,000 for a car repair, $2,500 for a plumbing emergency at their house, $3,000 for property taxes they were behind on. "You know we're good for it, Dad," Elizabeth would assure me, though she never mentioned repayment dates or terms. "As soon as Thomas's new business deal comes through, we'll be back on our feet." It was during one of these visits that Elizabeth first broached the subject that would eventually lead to our falling out. "I was reading about this wonderful retirement community, Sunshine Meadows," she said casually, as we sat at the kitchen table. "They have activities every day, gourmet meals and medical staff right on site." "Sounds like a nice place for somebody," I replied, deliberately obtuse. "But I'm perfectly happy right here." Elizabeth persisted. "Dad, you're not getting any younger. This house is too much for one person to maintain. What if you fell? Who would know? I have my phone. I have neighbors who check on me. I'm 67, not 97. She didn't push further that day, but the seed had been planted. Over the next few weeks, retirement communities, assisted living facilities, and senior apartments became regular topics of conversation. Elizabeth would leave brochures on my coffee table, send me links to websites, mention friends whose parents were so much happier after downsizing. Then Thomas started coming along on the visits. In all the years since their marriage, Thomas had rarely set foot in my home, unless it was a holiday or special occasion. Now suddenly, he was interested in my well-being. I watched him during these visits, noting how his eyes cataloged everything of value in each room. He'd comment on the craftsmanship of that grandfather clock, or ask, "Is that an original painting with thinly veiled assessment?" Once I caught him opening my desk drawer when he thought I was in the bathroom. Looking for something, I asked, standing in the doorway. He didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. "Elizabeth mentioned you might have the warranty for our refrigerator in here. We bought the same model you have." We had different refrigerators. I had checked when I visited their home for Amanda's 16th birthday the previous year. The questions became more intrusive. How much was my military pension? Did I have life insurance? Had I updated my will since Marianne passed? What investments did I maintain? Had I thought about who would inherit the house? "Thomas is just concerned about making sure you have your affairs in order," Elizabeth explained, when I expressed discomfort with these inquiries. "It's what Mom would have wanted." That was the first time I felt real anger toward my daughter. Using Marianne to manipulate me crossed a line. My wife had been meticulous about our financial planning, making sure everything was properly documented and arranged. Elizabeth knew this had sat with us during those difficult conversations in Marianne's final months. One rainy afternoon in March, I overheard Elizabeth on her phone in the kitchen while she thought I was napping in my recliner. "Yes, we're working on it," she was saying in a hushed tone. "The lawyer says we need documentation of cognitive decline before we can petition for legal guardianship, but he's still sharp as a tack, unfortunately." My blood ran cold. Legal guardianship, cognitive decline. My own daughter was plotting to have me declared incompetent. I stayed silent, letting her believe I had heard nothing. That night after she left, I called my old Army buddy Harold, now a retired attorney. "Watch your back," he warned, after I explained the situation. "I've seen this play out before. They're setting up to take control of your assets." The final confirmation came 2 weeks later. Elizabeth had left her purse in the living room while she used the bathroom. I'm not proud of snooping, but something told me I needed to know what I was up against. Inside her planner, I found notes from a meeting with a real estate agent. Potential listing price for 247 Maple Street was written at the top of the page, followed by a number that made my eyebrows raise. Below that were renovation suggestions to maximize selling price and a timeline that had the house on the market within 2 months. They were planning to sell my home out from under me, the home where I had raised my daughter, where I had held my wife's hand as she took her last breath, where 40 years of memories lived in every corner. Later that same evening, I overheard another phone call, this one to Thomas. "He's being stubborn about the retirement home idea," Elizabeth was saying. "But once we have the guardianship, it won't matter what he wants. The house will sell for enough to pay off our debts and set us up nicely." That was when I knew I needed to act. Not in anger, not in haste, but with the same strategic thinking that had served me well throughout my military career. My daughter and son-in-law had declared war on me, whether they called it that or not. And I had never been one to surrender without a fight. The following Saturday, I invited Amanda over for our regular grandfather-granddaughter lunch. We sat on the back porch eating sandwiches and watching the birds at the feeder Marianne had hung years ago. "How's school going?" I asked casually. "That new laptop helping with your science projects?" Amanda looked confused. "What laptop?" "The one your mom said you needed for school, with the special software for your science program." She shook her head slowly. "I don't have a new laptop, Grandpa. I'm still using the one you got me for Christmas 2 years ago." My suspicions confirmed, I pressed gently further. "What about the Washington, D.C. trip?" Are you excited about that? Washington trip. My class is going to the local aquarium next month, but that's only $20. By the end of our conversation, I had confirmed that none of the educational expenses Elizabeth had claimed were real. No laptop, no Washington trip, no special tutoring, no braces adjustment. Amanda hadn't seen a dime of the thousands I had given her mother. Is everything okay? Grandpa Amanda asked, noticing my distraction. Just thinking about some things I need to take care of, I said, forcing a smile. Now tell me more about this marine biology program you're interested in. That evening, after Amanda left, I pulled out my bank statements from the past 6 months. The total Elizabeth had borrowed was just over $20,000, money that I had freely given believing it was for my granddaughter's benefit. The next day I called an old friend from my unit, Paul Rodriguez, who had become a private investigator after leaving the service. I need some information on my son-in-law's financial situation, I explained, discreetly. Paul didn't ask questions about why. That's what I always appreciated about military friendships, the understanding that if you're asking for help, there's a good reason. 3 days later, Paul called me back. Your son-in-law is in deep trouble, Willie said without preamble. He lost his job at the investment firm 8 months ago for ethical violations, possibly fraud, though they kept it quiet. Since then, he's been borrowing money from anyone who will lend it, including some people you don't want to owe. He's also got a gambling problem that's not helping matters. And my daughter, I asked, dreading the answer. Hard to say how much she knows. Their house has 2 mortgages, they're 3 months behind on payments, and there's a lien against Thomas's car. They've been selling off assets, including some items that match descriptions of things you mentioned were missing from your house. The betrayal cut deep, but I couldn't afford to dwell on the emotional aspect. Not yet. I needed more information to form a complete picture of what I was dealing with. I went to the local courthouse the next morning and searched public records. There I found a pending application for conservatorship filed 2 weeks earlier by Elizabeth Spencer Harrison against Wilbur James Spencer, citing concerns about the subject's ability to manage his financial affairs due to age-related cognitive decline. Attached was a statement from a Dr. Phillips claiming he had observed signs consistent with early dementia during a recent examination. I had never met nor been examined by any Dr. Phillips. They were trying to have me declared incompetent based on fabricated medical evidence. The depths to which my own daughter would sink shocked even my prepared mind. Armed with this knowledge, I spent the next few days carefully documenting my daily activities, making videos of myself completing complex tasks and gathering statements from friends and neighbors attesting to my mental acuity. I also underwent a comprehensive cognitive assessment with my own physician, Dr. Marshall, who had been treating me for 20 years. You're sharper than most of my 40-year-old patients, Dr. Marshall assured me after the testing. I'd be happy to provide documentation to that effect if you need it. I was ready for the confrontation I knew was coming, but I hadn't expected it to happen the way it did. Elizabeth arrived unannounced that Friday afternoon, letting herself in with the key I had given her for emergencies. She was carrying a folder of papers and had a determined look on her face that reminded me painfully of Mary Ann when she'd set her mind on something. Dad, we need to talk about some important decisions. She began, sitting down at the kitchen table without being invited. I've been speaking with a lawyer about the house. Have you now? I kept my voice neutral, though my heart was pounding. And what does this lawyer say about my house? Our house, she corrected, emphasizing the word. Mom would have wanted us to make decisions together. And with your health concerns, what health concerns would those be? I asked mildly. She faltered slightly. Well, your age, living alone, the forgetfulness. What have I forgotten recently? Last week you couldn't remember where you put your glasses, she said triumphantly. They were on my head, I acknowledged. Pretty sure that happens to people of all ages. Elizabeth's frustration was visible now. Dad, stop being difficult. We're trying to help you. Thomas and I have found a wonderful assisted living facility where you'll be safe and cared for. We can sell this place, pay for your care, and and use what's left to bail out Thomas's gambling debts I finished for her. The color drained from her face. What are you talking about? I know everything, Elizabeth. About Thomas losing his job for ethical violations. About the second mortgage on your house. About the money you borrowed from me under false pretenses. About the conservatorship petition with the fraudulent medical assessment. She stared at me, shock giving way to anger. You've been spying on us. I've been protecting myself, I corrected, just as you would do if someone was trying to steal your home and life savings. That's not fair, she exploded, standing up so quickly her chair toppled backward. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me, Elizabeth? I asked quietly. Besides lie, steal family heirlooms, and try to have me declared incompetent. We're family, she shouted, as if that explained and excused everything. That money should be helping your granddaughter have a better life. Amanda hasn't seen a dime of what I've given you, I said. She doesn't have a new laptop or braces or tutoring or any of the other things you claimed the money was for. Elizabeth's face contorted with rage. You talked to Amanda behind my back. You had no right. She's my granddaughter. And you're stealing from both of us, Elizabeth. From her future and my past. You don't understand what we're going through. Tears were streaming down her face now, but I recognized them as tears of frustration rather than remorse. Thomas made some mistakes, but we can fix everything if you just cooperate. By selling my home against my will. By having me committed to a facility I don't need or want. It's not like that she insisted, though we both knew it was exactly like that. I think you should leave now, I said, standing up. And I'll need my house key back. That's when she lost control completely. Go away, she screamed, her face red with fury. Or I'll call the police. In my own home. My daughter was threatening to have me removed from my own home. Something inside me broke in that moment, but not in the way she might have expected. Instead of anger, I felt a strange calm, a clarity I hadn't experienced since my decision to finally retire from the military. I smiled at her, which only seemed to infuriate her more. What are you grinning about? I'm serious. I'll tell them you're having an episode, that you're a danger to yourself. Without a word, I walked past her to the hall closet, retrieved my jacket, and headed for the front door. Where are you going? She demanded, following me. We're not finished here. Yes, I said quietly. We are. I walked out of my house on that clear spring afternoon with only my wallet, phone, and car keys. Elizabeth's threats and pleas faded behind me as I got into my car and drove away. Instead of going to the police station as she might have feared, or to a friend's house to cool off, I drove straight to the office of Frank Davis, the most successful real estate agent in our county. It was time to take back control of my life, even if that meant letting go of the home that had sheltered my happiest memories. Frank Davis's office was in a converted Victorian home downtown, its wraparound porch now serving as a welcoming entrance to his real estate business. The receptionist recognized me immediately. Mr. Spencer, how lovely to see you. Are you finally ready to sell that beautiful house of yours? We've had inquiries over the years, you know. I think I am Darlene, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Is Frank available? Frank had sold us the house on Maple Street 40 years earlier, back when he was just starting his business and we were a young family with dreams bigger than our budget. He'd taken a personal interest in making sure we found the perfect home, and over the decades he'd stopped by occasionally to check in, always leaving his card with a note that if we ever decided to sell, he'd love to help. Wilbur Spencer, he greeted me standing from behind his desk with a warm handshake. His hair had gone completely white since I'd seen him last, but his grip was as firm as ever. Finally decided to downsize. Something like that, I replied. How quickly could you sell my place if I wanted to move fast? Frank raised an eyebrow. In this market, with a property like yours in that neighborhood, we could have it listed tomorrow and offers by the weekend. But what's the rush, planning to move south for your golden years? I considered how much to share with him. Frank wasn't just a businessman. He'd been a friend to our family over the years, attending Mary Ann's funeral and sending Amanda a graduation card when she finished middle school. "I need to sell before my daughter and son-in-law try to take control of the property," I said finally. "They've filed for conservatorship, claiming I'm not competent to manage my own affairs." Frank's expression darkened. "That doesn't sound like the Elizabeth I, remember." "People change," I said simply. "Or maybe I never really knew her." Over the next hour, I explained the situation in detail. Frank listened without interruption, occasionally making notes or nodding in understanding. "So you need to move fast and quietly," he summarized when I finished. "And you need to make sure the proceeds are protected from their schemes." "Exactly. You should talk to Grace Harrison at the law firm across the street," Frank advised. "She specializes in elder law and estate planning. She can help you set up the proper protections while I handle the real estate side." Grace turned out to be a sharp-witted woman about my age, who had been a close friend of Mary Ann's from their book club. She remembered me from social gatherings over the years and was horrified by my situation. "Unfortunately, what you're describing is not uncommon," she told me after hearing my story. "Adult children, seeing their parents as walking ATMs or piggy banks to be broken open. But we can absolutely prevent them from accessing your assets." Grace helped me create a comprehensive plan. First, we established a revocable living trust with myself as the trustee, and Amanda as the successor trustee, when she turned 21, effectively removing my assets from Elizabeth's potential grasp. Then we drew up power of attorney documents, naming my oldest friend Jacob as my healthcare proxy and financial agent, in case I truly became incapacitated in the future. These steps will make their conservatorship petition much more difficult to pursue, Grace explained. "And I'll file a formal objection to their petition, including the documentation from your physician attesting to your cognitive health." With the legal protections in place, I returned to Frank's office to move forward with selling the house. He had already prepared comparative market analyses and suggested a listing price that was substantially higher than what had been noted in Elizabeth's planner. "The market's hot right now," he explained, "and your home has been meticulously maintained. The original woodwork, the updated kitchen Mary Ann designed, the landscaping, all of it adds significant value." We agreed on a listing strategy that would minimize disruption but maximize exposure. Frank would hold a broker's open house first, inviting only real estate agents to view the property. Then a single public open house on the weekend, followed by an offer deadline on Monday. "What about your next home?" Frank asked as we finalized the listing agreement. "Have you thought about where you'll go?" I hadn't, not specifically, but I knew I wanted something completely different from the family home on Maple Street. Something without the emotional weight somewhere Elizabeth wouldn't immediately think to look for me. "I was thinking about that condo development near the marina," I said, "the one with the rooftop gardens." Frank nodded approvingly. "Harbor Heights. Great choice. Secure building maintenance included walking distance to shops and restaurants. And the views of the water are spectacular. I have a client who's getting ready to list a unit there next month, but I might be able to arrange a private sale if you're interested." While Frank worked his magic on the real estate front, I began the daunting task of sorting through 40 years of accumulated possessions. I couldn't take everything with me to a condo, nor did I want to. But there were things I couldn't bear to part with, treasures that held the essence of my life with Mary Ann, and memories of Elizabeth's childhood before everything went wrong. I rented a small storage unit under my friend Jacob's name, and began secretly moving the most precious items there. Mary Ann's hope chest with her wedding dress and family quilts, the box of Elizabeth's baby clothes, and first drawings that I couldn't bring myself to destroy despite everything, photo albums and home movies, my military service mementos. For the furniture and household items I wouldn't need in the condo, I contacted a reputable estate sale company recommended by Frank. They would handle everything after the house sale closed, ensuring that items were properly valued and sold. During this time, Elizabeth called repeatedly, alternating between tearful apologies and angry demands that we talk things through. I let most calls go to voicemail, responding only with brief texts assuring her I was safe but needed time to think. In reality, I was buying time to execute my plan before she realized what was happening. Thomas was less subtle in his approach. His messages became increasingly threatening. "You're making a big mistake, old man," one voicemail growled. "We're family. We're supposed to look out for each other. If you keep pushing us away, you might find yourself truly alone when you really need help." The thinly veiled threats only strengthened my resolve. This wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about survival and self-preservation. I had given everything to my country during my military service, and everything to my family in the years after. Now, in what should have been my peaceful retirement years, I needed to finally put myself first. 6 days after my confrontation with Elizabeth, Frank called with exciting news. "We've had 12 agents through the broker's open house, and I've already received 3 preemptive offers," he reported. "One is all cash 20% above asking price, with a 10-day close and rent-back option if you need more time to move out." The speed and success of Frank's efforts stunned me. "That's incredible, Frank." "Well, it's a special house," he said warmly. "And between us, I made sure to show it to agents with clients who would appreciate its character, not developers looking to tear it down for a McMansion." The cash offer was from a young surgeon and her professor husband who had been searching for a family home in our neighborhood for months. They had 2 small children and wanted a place with history and charm where they could put down roots. The thought of a new family creating their own memories in the house eased some of the pain of letting it go. I accepted their offer that afternoon, and the whirlwind of inspections, paperwork, and preparations began. Frank handled most of it, allowing me to focus on my own transition plans. The Harbor Heights condo exceeded my expectations. Located on the 6th floor, it had panoramic views of the marina, a spacious open floor plan, and 2 bedrooms, one of which I could use as a study. The building had security, a fitness center, and that rooftop garden Frank had mentioned, where residents grew vegetables and flowers in raised beds. Best of all, it was only a 15-minute drive from Amanda's school, meaning I could maintain our weekly grandfather-granddaughter lunches without difficulty. The owner, a widow moving to Arizona to be near her son, was delighted to sell directly to me, especially when I offered to let her take her time moving out. "It's so hard to leave a place filled with memories," she told me when we met to discuss terms. "I understand completely." I assured her, feeling a kinship with this stranger, who knew the particular grief of letting go. As the pieces of my plan fell into place, I realized I needed to tell Amanda what was happening before she heard it from her parents. I invited her to dinner at her favorite restaurant, a small Italian place where the owner still made pasta by hand. "Grandpa, what's going on?" she asked as soon as we were seated. "Mom's been acting weird, saying you're not answering her calls, that you might be confused about things." I took a deep breath and told her everything from the fabricated expenses to the conservatorship petition to my decision to sell the house. She listened with growing horror, occasionally shaking her head or wiping away tears. "I knew things were bad at home, but I had no idea they'd do something like this," she said finally. "What can I do to help?" Her immediate offer of support touched me deeply. "Just knowing you understand means everything," I told her. "I don't want to put you in the middle of this fight with your parents." "They put me in the middle when they used me as an excuse to take your money," she said firmly. "I want to help." And she hesitated before continuing. "I was wondering if maybe after all this settles down, I could stay with you sometimes. Things at home are really tense, and with college applications coming up next year. My door will always be open to you." I promised, thinking of the 2nd bedroom in my new condo that would be perfect for her visits. As I drove home that night, I felt lighter than I had in months. The house on Maple Street had been my anchor for so long, holding me to the past with both comfort and constraint. Now, despite the painful circumstances forcing my hand, I was discovering that letting go might actually be the beginning of something new, rather than just the end of something cherished. The next morning, my phone rang early. It was Frank, his voice tight with urgency. "Wilbur, Elizabeth just called the office asking about listings on Maple Street. She specifically wanted to know if your house was on the market. My heart sank. What did you tell her? Nothing directly, client confidentiality and all that. But she's suspicious. You might want to prepare for another confrontation. I thanked him for the warning and immediately called Grace to update her on the situation. She assured me that legally, Elizabeth couldn't stop the sale, especially with the trust now in place, but she might try other tactics to delay or derail the process. Don't sign anything she gives you, Grace cautioned. And if possible, don't meet with her alone. Record any interactions on your phone if you can, just in case. I spent the day securing the remaining valuable items in my home, moving them either to the storage unit or to Jacob's house for safekeeping. By evening, I had prepared as much as possible for whatever storm might be coming. It arrived the next morning in the form of Thomas's black SUV screeching into my driveway, Elizabeth jumping out before he'd even fully stopped. I watched through the window as they approached, noting Thomas's barely contained rage and Elizabeth's determined expression. This was it, the moment of truth. The confrontation that would either break what remained of our family bond forever or perhaps begin a painful but necessary healing. I opened the door before they could knock and stood firmly in the threshold. Elizabeth, Thomas, I've been expecting you. Is it true? Elizabeth demanded without preamble. Are you selling the house? I gestured toward the for sale sign Frank's team had placed in the front yard that morning, its under contract banner already attached. Yes. Thomas pushed past me into the foyer, his face flushed with anger. You can't do this. This house is part of Elizabeth's inheritance. You're just the caretaker until I die, I finished for him, keeping my voice steady. That could be a long wait, Thomas. My last physical showed I'm in excellent health for a man of 67. Elizabeth followed her husband inside, looking around the living room with growing alarm at the changes. Many of the decorative items were gone, packed away or stored. The walls where family photos had hung showed lighter patches against the paint. What have you done with everything, she asked. Mom's things, the family photos. They're safe, I assured her. And they'll remain so. Thomas was pacing now, running his hand through his hair in agitation. This is insane. You can't just sell a family home on a whim. We have rights here. Actually, you don't, I corrected him. The house is solely in my name. Marianne and I updated all our property ownership after Elizabeth turned 21, creating joint tenancy with right of survivorship. When she passed, I became the sole owner. But we're your family. Elizabeth insisted, her voice rising. You can't just make these decisions without consulting us. The way you consulted me about filing for conservatorship, I countered. Or about planning to sell this very house and move me into an assisted living facility against my will. They exchanged a startled look, clearly surprised by how much I knew. That was for your own good, Elizabeth said, recovering quickly. We're worried about you living alone at your age. My age, I repeated. I'm 67, Elizabeth. When my father was 67, he was still working full-time and rebuilding classic cars on the weekends. Age is just a number. This isn't about your age, Thomas cut in impatiently. It's about family responsibility. We're struggling right now, and you're sitting on a gold mine doing nothing with it. The naked greed in his statement hung in the air between us. At least he was finally being honest about their motivations. I'm sorry you're having financial difficulties, I said sincerely. But selling my home against my will isn't the solution to your problems. So you're just going to abandon us? Elizabeth's voice cracked with emotion that seemed genuine, making my heart ache despite everything. After all we've done for you. Before I could respond, the front door opened again, and Amanda walked in. Her timing was perfect, just as we had planned during our dinner the previous night. I think the better question, Mom, is, what have you actually done for Grandpa? She asked, dropping her backpack by the door. Besides, try to steal his house and money. Elizabeth whirled around, shock evident on her face. Amanda, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at debate practice. I told Coach I had a family emergency, Amanda replied calmly. Which is true, isn't it? Our family is in the middle of an emergency you and Dad created. Thomas's face darkened. Go wait in the car, Amanda. This doesn't concern you. It absolutely concerns me, she shot back. You used me as an excuse to take money from Grandpa. You told him it was for my laptop, my braces, my tutoring, my school trip, when I never saw any of that. Elizabeth at least had the grace to look ashamed. We were going to use that money for your college fund. Stop lying, Amanda interrupted, her voice tight with anger. I found the online casino receipts on Dad's computer. I saw the credit card statements. I know what's really been happening with the money. Thomas took a threatening step toward his daughter. You had no right to go through my private things. I moved between them immediately. That's enough, Thomas. Don't even think about it. For a tense moment, I thought he might try to push past me, but something in my expression must have reminded him of my military background. He backed down, though his fists remained clenched at his sides. This is ridiculous, he muttered. Being ganged up on in our own family home. It's not your home, I reminded him gently. And in 7 days, it won't be mine either. I've accepted an offer from a lovely young couple who will fill it with children and new memories. Elizabeth sank onto the sofa, the fight seeming to drain out of her. Where will you go? I've purchased a condo downtown near the marina. With our money, Thomas snapped. With the proceeds from the sale of my house, I corrected him. Which, by the way, sold for considerably more than the number I saw in Elizabeth's planner. The real estate market is quite strong right now. Elizabeth's head snapped up. You went through my purse. After discovering you were going through my desk, my filing cabinets, and my private papers. Yes, I did. And I'm glad I did. Or I might not have discovered your plans until it was too late. So that's it then, Elizabeth asked, her voice small. You're just cutting us off, your own family. I sighed deeply and sat down in my old armchair across from her. That's not what this is about, Elizabeth. This is about boundaries and respect. About recognizing that I'm still a competent adult with the right to make my own decisions. But we need help, she insisted. Thomas lost his job, we're behind on the mortgage. Amanda's college is coming up. I know all about Thomas losing his job, I said. And why? Just as I know about the gambling debts, and the second mortgage, and the credit card bills. Thomas made a strangled sound of outrage. You had us investigated. I protected myself. I corrected him. Something I should have done much sooner. Amanda moved to stand beside my chair, her hand resting supportively on my shoulder. The gesture wasn't lost on Elizabeth, whose eyes filled with tears at this visible sign of the alliance between her daughter and her father. I don't know what to do, Elizabeth whispered, and for the first time in months, I saw a glimpse of my real daughter beneath the manipulative facade she'd been presenting. Everything's falling apart. I reached for the envelope I'd placed on the side table, earlier anticipating this moment. I want you to have this, I said, holding it out to her. She took it hesitantly. What is it? Open it. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000 and a handwritten letter. Elizabeth stared at the check in disbelief. I don't understand. It's a fresh start, I explained. Not a bailout for gambling debts or failed investments, but seed money for you to rebuild your life. The letter explains the conditions. Thomas tried to snatch the check from her hands, but Elizabeth held it away from him. What conditions, she asked, her eyes never leaving mine. The money goes into an account in your name only. You use it for legitimate expenses, job training. If you need it, maybe a small apartment of your own while you figure things out. And you get help, real professional help, to understand how you ended up in this situation. This is insulting, Thomas sputtered. You're trying to break up our marriage. I turned to him directly. Your marriage was in trouble long before I got involved, Thomas. And from what I've seen and heard, you're the primary reason why. He lunged forward, suddenly grabbing for the check in Elizabeth's hand. Give me that. We need it for the mortgage. What happened next shocked us all. Elizabeth pulled back, tearing the check slightly, as she yanked it from his grasp. "No, Thomas, Dad's right. This needs to stop." Thomas stared at her in disbelief. "You're taking his side. After everything we've planned." "Look at us," Elizabeth cried. "Look at what we've become. Lying, stealing, trying to declare my own father incompetent for money. This isn't who I want to be." Thomas's face contorted with rage. "You weak, pathetic." He didn't finish the sentence, instead grabbing his car keys from his pocket. "I'm done with all of you. Keep your money and your moral high ground. You deserve each other." He stormed out the door, slamming behind him with such force that the framed photo of Marianne on the wall tilted askew. The sound of his SUV peeling out of the driveway echoed through the suddenly quiet house. Elizabeth sat frozen, the check still clutched in her hand, tears streaming down her face. Amanda moved hesitantly toward her mother, sitting beside her on the sofa. "Mom," she said softly, "are you okay?" Elizabeth shook her head slowly. I'm not okay. I haven't been okay for a long time." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and grief. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I don't even know how we got here." "One small compromise at a time," I said gently. "One rationalization after another." She nodded, understanding in her expression. "What happens now?" "That's largely up to you," I told her. "But whatever you decide, know that I still love you. You're still my daughter. Nothing can change that, not even this." Elizabeth broke down then, great heaving sobs that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. Amanda put her arms around her mother, holding her as she cried. I watched them, this daughter and granddaughter, who shared the same determined chin, the same crease between their eyebrows when they were upset. Family. Complicated, messy, sometimes heartbreaking, but still family. As the afternoon light slanted through the windows of the home I would soon leave behind, I realized that perhaps I wasn't losing everything after all. Perhaps in letting go of the house that had sheltered our family for 40 years, I was creating space for something new to emerge from the ashes of what had been destroyed. It wouldn't be easy. Trust once broken doesn't mend overnight. But as I watched Elizabeth begin to confront the truth of what she had almost done, I felt the first fragile seedling of hope take root in my heart. The journey ahead would be difficult, but at least now we were walking in the light of truth rather than the shadows of deception. And in that moment, despite everything, I was grateful. The week following our confrontation passed in a blur of activity. The house sale proceeded smoothly, with inspections completed and contingencies removed ahead of schedule. Frank called daily with updates, his enthusiasm for the young couple buying the house infectious. "They love the built-in bookshelves in the study," he reported one afternoon. "The husband is already planning which books will go where." These small details brought me unexpected comfort. The house would be loved by its new owners, filled with the same kind of family joy that had once filled it during our best years. Elizabeth had moved into a small apartment near Amanda's school, using part of the money I had given her as a deposit and first month's rent. Thomas had not returned home after our confrontation, though Elizabeth received divorce papers via courier 3 days later. "He's asking for half of the money you gave me," she told me during one of our careful, stilted phone conversations. "His lawyer says it's community property." I put her in touch with Grace, who helped her find a divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving financial abuse. "You need someone who understands what you've been through," Grace advised. "Someone who will fight for your interests, not just negotiate a quick settlement." Amanda split her time between Elizabeth's apartment and my house as I packed up the last of my belongings. She seemed relieved by the turn of events, though concerned about her mother's emotional state. "She cries a lot," Amanda confided as we sorted through books in the study. "But she's also talking more than she has in years. Really talking about how she felt trapped with Dad, how she lost herself." "That's a good sign," I assured her. "Healing starts with honesty." My own healing was a work in progress. Some days I felt lighter, excited about the new chapter ahead in my condo by the marina. Other days, the weight of what had happened with Elizabeth and the loss of the family home I had shared with Marianne hit me hard, leaving me sitting alone among half-packed boxes, clutching old photographs and wondering where I had gone. Wrong. On one such difficult day, I found myself in the backyard staring at the rose bushes Marianne had so lovingly tended. The thought of leaving them behind pierced my heart with unexpected sharpness. "We can take cuttings," a voice said behind me. I turned to find Elizabeth standing there, a garden trowel and several small pots in her hands. "Mom showed me how once we can root them and plant them at your new place." The simple gesture, the acknowledgement of what these roses meant to me, broke something open between us. We spent the afternoon working side by side in the garden, taking careful cuttings from each of Marianne's prized bushes, preparing them for transplanting to their new home. "I miss her," Elizabeth said as we worked. "I think losing her made everything worse somehow. Like without her steadying influence, I just lost my way." "She was the compass for both of us," I agreed. "But she also taught us how to find our own true north when she couldn't be here to guide us." "I forgot that lesson for a while," Elizabeth admitted. "Or maybe I ignored it, because it was easier to blame circumstances than to take responsibility." These moments of genuine connection were fragile, interspersed with awkward silences and occasional flares of defensive anger on Elizabeth's part. Recovery wasn't a straight line, but a winding path with unexpected setbacks and surprising moments of grace. The day before closing on the house sale, Jacob helped me move the last of my furniture to the condo. Elizabeth and Amanda came by to help with the final cleaning, a family effort to honor the home that had sheltered us through so many seasons of life. As we worked, Elizabeth found Marianne's old recipe box in a kitchen cabinet I had overlooked. "Oh my God," she exclaimed, opening it with reverent hands. Her famous snickerdoodle recipe, and the beef stew Dad always requested for his birthday. "You should keep it," I said, watching her flip through the handwritten cards. "You were always more interested in cooking than I was." She looked up, surprise and gratitude in her eyes. "Really? But these were Mom's. And she'd want you to have them. I finished for her, to make those recipes for Amanda, and maybe someday for Amanda's children." Elizabeth carefully closed the recipe box, hugging it to her chest. "Thank you." That evening, after Elizabeth and Amanda had gone, I took one last walk through the empty house. Each room echoed with memories, some joyful, some painful, all part of the tapestry of our family story. In the master bedroom, where Marianne and I had shared thousands of nights, and where I had held her as she took her final breaths, I paused the longest. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the windows, illuminating the bare walls and empty corners. "I think I'm doing the right thing, Mari," I said aloud, feeling only slightly foolish for talking to an empty room. "I hope you'd be proud of how I handled this." A sense of peace settled over me then, a feeling that Marianne would indeed understand and approve of my decisions. Not just the sale of the house, but the choice to offer Elizabeth a path to redemption rather than simply cutting her out of my life. The next morning, I signed the closing documents in Frank's office, officially transferring ownership of 247 Maple Street to its new family. As I handed over the keys, I felt a surprising lightness. The house had been both shelter and burden these past 5 years without Marianne. Now I was free to create a new life, one that honored her memory without being imprisoned by it. My condo at Harbor Heights welcomed me with panoramic views of the marina and the gentle sound of halyards clinking against masts in the breeze. The previous owner had left me a bottle of champagne and a card, wishing me fair winds and following seas in my new home. I spent that first evening arranging the few pieces of furniture I had brought with me, setting up the second bedroom for Amanda's visits, and finding the perfect spots for the precious mementos I had kept. Marianne's portrait went on the wall facing the sofa, where I could see her smile every day. The shadow box containing my military medals and the flag from my retirement ceremony found a place of honor in the study. As the sun set over the water, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, I opened the champagne and poured a single glass. Stepping out onto the balcony, I raised it in a silent toast to new beginnings. The transition wasn't without its challenges. I missed my old neighbors, the familiar creaks and sounds of the house on Maple Street, the garden I had tended for decades. But I also discovered unexpected joys in my new surroundings. The convenience of walking to restaurants and shops. The community of the building, many of whom were also retirees with interesting stories and shared experiences. The freedom from constant home maintenance and yard work. Elizabeth continued her therapy sessions, slowly untangling the web of financial and emotional abuse that had characterized her marriage to Thomas. She found a part-time job at a local bookstore, her first independent employment in 15 years. "It doesn't pay much," she told me, during one of our weekly dinners now, a tentative new tradition. "But it feels good to earn my own money to interact with people who don't know me as Thomas's wife or Amanda's mother." Amanda thrived in the changed family dynamic. With her father's oppressive presence removed, and her mother beginning to rediscover her own strength, Amanda bloomed. Her grades, already excellent, improved even further. She spent more time pursuing her interest in marine biology, volunteering at the local aquarium, and joining a conservation group that conducted monthly beach cleanups. "The University of Washington has an amazing oceanography program," she mentioned one afternoon, as we sat on my balcony watching the boats in the marina. "And it's close enough that I could still see you and Mom regularly." "Is that where you want to go?" I asked, aware of the subtle shift in her thinking from escape to connection. She nodded thoughtfully. "I think so. I used to want to go as far away as possible, you know. But now I don't feel that way anymore." Thomas remained a difficult presence on the periphery of our lives. His divorce proceedings with Elizabeth turned contentious when he realized she had legal support and wouldn't be easily intimidated. He tried repeatedly to contact Amanda, alternating between guilt trips and extravagant promises, but she maintained firm boundaries with the support of her therapist. 3 months after the move, I received a call from Paul, my investigator friend. "Thought you should know," he said without preamble. "Your ex-son-in-law just got arrested for wire fraud. Looks like your family situation was just the tip of the iceberg with his financial schemes." The news brought a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that Thomas would no longer be able to manipulate or threaten Elizabeth and Amanda. Sadness for the wasted potential of a man who had chosen deception over honest work. And a renewed appreciation for the bullet we had collectively dodged. When I shared the information with Elizabeth, she was silent for a long moment. "I keep thinking I should feel something more," she finally said. "Shock or grief or anger. But mostly I just feel nothing. Like he's already been gone from my heart for a long time." "That's okay too," I assured her. "You've done your grieving for that relationship already." As summer turned to fall, the rose cuttings we had taken from Marianne's garden began to put out new growth in their pots on my balcony. Elizabeth helped me transplant them to larger containers, the two of us working together just as we had in the garden of our old home. "Remember how Mom used to talk to her roses?" Elizabeth asked, gently patting soil around a fragile stem. I smiled at the memory. "Every morning," she said, "plants respond to love just like people do." "I think she was right," Elizabeth said softly, "about a lot of things." In that moment, tending new life born from old roots, I felt Marianne's presence more strongly than I had in years. Not as a ghost or a supernatural visitation, but as the living legacy of her wisdom and love expressed through our daughter who was finding her way back to the person Marianne had raised her to be. The roses would bloom again next spring. Different soil, different surroundings, but the same essential nature. Just like our family changed but enduring, finding new ways to grow toward the light. 1 year after selling the house on Maple Street, I hosted a small dinner party in my condo to celebrate Amanda's acceptance to the University of Washington's prestigious oceanography program. The table was set on my balcony, overlooking the marina strings of lights, adding a festive glow as the sun set over the water. Elizabeth arrived, first carrying a homemade apple pie made from Marianne's recipe. At 41, my daughter looked younger than she had in years. The stress lines around her eyes softened her movements, more relaxed and natural. The divorce from Thomas had been finalized 6 months earlier, after he accepted a plea deal for the fraud charges that would keep him in minimum security prison for at least 3 years. "The place looks amazing, Dad," she said, taking in the potted roses now thriving along the balcony rail. The comfortable outdoor furniture, the view of boats gently rocking in their slips below. "You've really made it your own." "It feels like home now," I agreed, taking the pie from her, which surprised me, to be honest. I wasn't sure anywhere would after Maple Street. "I drove by there last week," Elizabeth admitted as she helped me arrange glasses on the table. "The new owners have painted the shutters blue. It looks good." There was no pain in her voice, just thoughtful observation. We had both come to terms with the necessary ending that had enabled our new beginnings. Amanda arrived next, accompanied by her boyfriend Michael, a serious young man, studying environmental law, whom she had met through her conservation volunteer work. They made a handsome couple, their shared passion for protecting the ocean evident in the animated way they discussed the latest marine sanctuary proposal. Jacob and his wife Susan completed our small gathering, bringing a bottle of champagne for the celebration. As my oldest friend Jacob had witnessed the entire arc of our family drama, offering steady support throughout the darkest days, his presence tonight felt right, a connection between past and present. Over dinner, conversation flowed easily, touching on Amanda's university plans, Elizabeth's recent promotion at the bookstore, and my new hobby of sailing, picked up from a neighbor in the building who had taken me under his wing. "I never pictured you as a sailor, Dad," Elizabeth remarked with a smile. "Neither did I chuckled. "But there's something peaceful about being out on the water. It gives you perspective." "Grandpa's pretty good at it too," Amanda added. "His instructor says he has natural instincts." "Old dog's new tricks," I said with a wink, raising my glass in a mock toast. As we enjoyed Elizabeth's apple pie with coffee after dinner, Amanda grew serious, looking around at our small gathering with thoughtful eyes. "I want to thank all of you," she said. "This past year hasn't been easy, but I don't think I've ever felt more supported or loved. And I wouldn't have gotten into this program without your encouragement." "You did the work, sweetie," Elizabeth said, reaching over to squeeze her daughter's hand. "We just cheered from the sidelines." "Still, I know how lucky I am," Amanda insisted. "To have a family that came through a really tough time and actually got stronger instead of falling apart completely." Her words hung in the air, a simple but profound acknowledgement of the journey we had traveled together. From the brink of irreparable destruction to this moment of genuine connection and celebration. After Jacob and Susan left, and Amanda and Michael headed out to meet friends for a late movie, Elizabeth lingered, helping me clear the dishes and pack away the leftover food. "Can we talk for a minute?" she asked, as we finished up, her expression suddenly serious. Of course. I led her back out to the balcony where the night air was cool and fresh, the lights of the marina creating a twinkling backdrop below us. Elizabeth took a deep breath. "I've never properly apologized for what I almost did to you, for the conservatorship, the lies, all of it." "You've apologized many times," I reminded her gently. "Not directly, not specifically." She shook her head. "I think I've been too ashamed to really face it head on. But I need to say it, and you deserve to hear it." I waited, giving her the space to find her words. "I betrayed you in the worst possible way," she said finally, her voice steady, despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "I took your love and trust and tried to use it against you. I lied to you about Amanda, about our finances, about everything. I let Thomas convince me that you owed us, that taking control of your assets was somehow justified." She paused, wiping at her eyes. "The truth is, I was scared. Scared of Thomas, scared of losing our house, scared of failing Amanda. But that's not an excuse. What I did, what I almost did, was unforgivable. And yet somehow you found a way to forgive me anyway. You're my daughter," I said simply. "And you found your way back to yourself, to the person your mother and I raised you to be. Because you gave me the chance," she countered. "You could have cut me off completely, and no one would have blamed you. Instead, you offered me a path forward. You showed me what real love looks like, what real strength looks like." I reached across the table, and took her hand in mine, noticing how much it resembled Marianne's, the same tapered fingers, the same small mole near the wrist. I learned something important through all this, I told her. Love doesn't mean letting people harm you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do both for yourself and for someone who's lost their way is to set firm boundaries. Elizabeth nodded. I'm teaching Amanda that now, how to love people without losing herself. Your mother would be proud of you, I said, not just for rebuilding your life, but for the way you're breaking the cycle, showing Amanda a different path. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the gentle lapping of water against the dock below and the distant call of a night bird. Do you ever regret selling the house? Elizabeth asked eventually. Miss all those memories? I considered the question carefully. I miss certain things, I acknowledged. The tree you and I planted when you were 10. The mark on the kitchen doorframe where we measured your height every birthday. The window seat, where your mother used to read. I gestured around us at the condo, the marina, the new life I had built. But the most important memories came with me. And selling that house saved our family, Elizabeth. Sometimes you have to let go of one kind of home to find another. She smiled through her tears. That's a good way to put it. As I walked her to the door later that evening, Elizabeth paused in the entryway. Mom would have handled this better than I did, she said softly. She would have found another way. Don't be so sure, I replied. Your mother was wise and kind, but she was also fierce when it came to protecting what mattered. She taught me that sometimes love requires difficult choices. After Elizabeth left, I returned to the balcony, looking out over the peaceful marina. The path that had brought me here had been painful beyond measure, forced upon me by circumstances I would never have chosen. And yet, standing in my new home, surrounded by new possibilities while still honoring the past, I felt profound gratitude. The daughter who had once screamed for me to go away, or she'd call the police, was finding her way back to herself, back to our family. The granddaughter who might have been collateral damage in a toxic situation was thriving, her future bright with promise. And I, who might have been stripped of my autonomy and dignity in my final years, had instead found a new chapter filled with unexpected joys. Sometimes the greatest acts of love require the greatest courage. Sometimes protecting yourself is the first step toward healing a broken family. Sometimes letting go of a house full of memories is the only way to save what truly matters. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect yourself from someone you love? What boundaries have you set in your own relationships? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, true love, including self-love, sometimes means having the courage to say no, even to family.